Yo, let's talk about CO2. So, when you hear CO2, what's the first thing you think? Generally, what people think when they hear CO2 is poison, waste product. It's killing the environment, it's destroying the earth. And while some of that is true, it is a waste product. That is only a piece of what it does within the body. And now, when we talk about the body, chronically exposed to CO2 is not ideal, but situational intentional exposure to CO2 allows you to have more CO2 in the body, which is what we want. Because most people nowadays are overbreathers and shallow breathers. And so they're breathing fast and they're breathing shallow. So what they're doing is getting rid of CO2 constantly, and that creates an intolerance to having CO2 in the body. And the main aspect of CO2 what it does for us is it creates the urge to breathe, creates air hunger. So when you hold your breath and you sit there, you could try it right now. Take a deep breath in, hold, and then just wait for the air hunger to build. And all you're going to do is release the breath when you feel the air hunger and just feel that sense of relaxation. You didn't breathe back in. Okay, so it's not oxygen that's doing that, it's the release of CO2. So it's an important aspect of breathing, and it's an important aspect of our mental health and our physical health. And I'm going to go through all these slides and show you exactly what. But I want you to think about this right now. If you have a low tolerance to CO2 and you always have that underlying feeling of discomfort, that air hunger feeling, that panicky feeling, that just discomfort, and you're always like that, you are always going to have anxiety. So this could be a big piece of what's going on right now. So let's get into it. The first one is basically just what I said, but I wanted to read this quote from the OG Yendell Henderson. Carbon dioxide is the chief hormone of the entire body. It is the only one that is produced by every tissue and probably acts on every organ. He's the OG in a sense. He was like a big gas scientist and really important in the breath science world. Next, CO2 has many important functions of the body, but modern society, our tolerance is low due to inactivity, poor diet, and overbreathing. And by overbreathing, I mean mouth breathing and shallow breathing. These habits and our tolerance are a double-edged sword that cause us to off-gas or remove CO2 from the body. Again, like I said, we are breathing out and in really quick, so we're getting rid of CO2 and we are losing our relationship to it, our tolerance to it. And this affects a ton of processes in the body and causes chronic disease. So here are the reasons why we need to improve our tolerance to CO2 with regular breath training, exercise, and a whole food diet, as well as an ancestral approach to life, or a biological approach. So the first one is the big one. They're all big ones. I'm going to say that every single time. So this O2 delivery to the cells and tissue. CO2 determines the strength of the bond between oxygen and hemoglobin. So hemoglobin is responsible for delivering oxygen. So as we breathe in, oxygen will attach to hemoglobin. Hemoglobin will transport it throughout the body. And where was I at? So low CO2 content strengthens the bond between hemoglobin and oxygen, so it's more difficult for oxygen to leave the blood and go to the body cells that need it. And this is known as the Bohr effect. And the Bohr effect basically means that when you're in a state of rest, you can try to breathe more oxygen, but it's just going to result in decreased oxygen release in the blood due to lower CO2 content. So again, the more you breathe, the less oxygen you're going to absorb. So I can't remember the actual stats on this. It's something like based on your breaths per minute is a drastic amount of oxygen absorbed versus oxygen expelled. So the next one is the body compensates when this happens. Low CO2 and resulting in low unusable O2. So when O2 is low, heart rate and blood pressure increases to pump more O2 around the body. This directly relates to poor health and increased stress, anxiety, and fear. So when you don't have a proper amount of CO2 in the body, O2 is not absorbed. And then now the body's like, let's get more oxygen pumping through here. So what's that? Faster heart rate, more breathing, and more anxiety, more fear. Restricted blood and airflow. So when CO2 is low in the body, our passages constrict and make it more difficult for blood and air to flow. When CO2 is present, the blood vessels open, they vasodilate, and that allows more oxygen and nutrient-rich blood to flow. CO2 also helps the passages of our lungs to open and relax, and this allows more air to flow. So CO2 is allowing the blood and air to flow, and it's also allowing it to be utilized. Huge. pH balance. So CO2 is one of the biggest influences on our blood pH. And while the body is amazingly efficient at managing this, we want to be at base. We don't want to be alkaline, the alkaline diet, all this other shit. If the system is off, the body will just need to work harder. So if you're sitting in an alkaline state all the time, a lot of functions are not happening. So we're not absorbing vitamins, minerals, and our enzymes in the body are halting. And obviously, this affects many metabolic processes throughout the body. So it's very important. Nervous system regulation. So low levels of CO2, and this is what we want. This is baseline. If you have anxiety, if you have fear, we want to regulate the nervous system, but we need to be able to use CO2 to our advantage. So low levels of CO2 cause us to be intolerant to slight increases of CO2 in the blood, which we need, and cause the nervous system to become excited chronically, which is not what we want. Again, resulting in anxiety disorders, chronic stress, fatigue, and ADHD. Most of the kids you see with ADHD are mouth breathers at night. Tape their mouth shut, do whatever you need to do, but get them breathing through this. And that's just going to go to the next one right here. So this is what it also affects. It affects our brain function and our intellect and our memory and our creativity. So it makes us dumber. For neurons to synapse with brain cells efficiently, the ideal level of CO2 is necessary. Low CO2 levels make the communication between brain cells more erratic, unstable, unpredictable, and thus can lower IQ and negatively influence emotional balance. There's nothing else to say there. I'll keep going. Breathlessness. So chronic here across the world. This is an epidemic, breathlessness. Everybody seems to have a really high breath rate, and CO2 is the cause of that in your relationship to CO2. So again, we're back to that mouth breathing. We're back to that chest breathing. We're back to that fast, shallow breath. So that means we have a low tolerance to CO2, and then CO2 gives us that urge to breathe. So the more intolerant we are of it, the faster our breath rate. So this means when you feel tired and out of breath from the slightest amount, you will feel tired from the slightest amount of exercise. Higher CO2 levels will help your respiratory center allow the breathing to stay normal during exercise, so you can do much more exercise more intensely without feeling out of breath. So if you are everything from the layman all the way up to the performance athlete and everybody in between, if you exercise, you can just add breath and you will enhance your performance without changing your current program. That's CrossFit athletes, sport athletes, endurance athletes, triathletes, whatever. That's the person that goes for a walk, the person that works out 2 days a week, the person that is a 5K runner. Everybody would benefit from adding these practices into their lifestyle, which is really short and really simple. And you can actually monitor and progress all of these practices. So whoever you are, work on adding these back in, work on testing your breath, work on testing your biomechanics, work on breathing better, work on breathing through the nose. And let's do this thing. Let's keep going. All right, blood sugar regulation. So this one's the surprising one for a lot of people is low CO2 causes decreased uptake of glucose from the blood and increases your blood sugar levels. The rate and efficiency at which glucose passes cell membranes and is delivered to cells is regulated by how much CO2 is present. If CO2 levels are optimal, sugar can be burned more quickly and blood sugar levels can become more stable. On top of that, 80% of the weight that you lose, I think a little bit higher, is out through the breath through carbon dioxide. Carbon molecules are released. How many breaths do you think you need to exhale in order to lose 20 pounds? And that's the question. And it doesn't mean start breathing faster. You won't lose weight like that. Maybe. Immune system. That's right there. It's written. It's just weakens your immune system. So if you want to be healthier, you got to have a better relationship with CO2. It has to be present in the body. Again, it's leveling our pH and it allows our immune system to flourish. You can look at Wim Hof studies that they did on him. He does long breath holds. He is over breathing as well. I think, and this is just my theory, I think if he simply did the breath holds with regular breathing and not over breathing, that it would have the same effect. But I don't know if they tested that. I doubt they did. Um, and I still love Wim Hof stuff. I think the major piece of that was the CO2. And what they did was injected him with staph. I think it was like whatever the medical variation of staph, or maybe it was E. coli. I actually don't remember. You can look it up. And they did like 20 something other people using the same breath, and none of them got sick. So pretty cool. And then last, the good news, thank God, you can fix it. And the increase of CO2 tolerance, you must practice exposing yourself to it. So becoming more active and living a healthier lifestyle, these habits are the gold standard. So the breath training piece, intermittent hypoxia, so low exposure or exposure to low oxygen is one end of it. And then on the other end, we have exposure to CO2, which is your static apnea and your active apnea. Static means you're lying down, you're doing breath hold work. Active means that you're doing your breath hold runs, breath hold sprints. You're doing hypoventilation where you're breathing less, where you always feel the air hunger. Maybe you're just breathing through your nose while you're training your cardio. Making sure you get enough movement in. So that's walking at least 8,000 steps a day at minimum. That's your zone 2 cardio, which is you're still able to have a conversation. Or in the breath world, you're able to still breathe through the nose, but it's difficult. And then VO2 max intervals is basically your sprints. You can do breath hold sprints as well if you want to add that to there. Your diet is very important, and a low inflammatory diet is going to be very important. Whole foods based, low processed foods, higher fiber, and also really when we talk about this, gut health is going to be imperative as well. So adding pro and prebiotics, which is basically your fermented foods and your resistant starches, as well as a bone broth for healing the gut, and some polyphenols as well. And then hydration for all of this is important, from your gut health to your body's function. Obviously, we know that, but also adding in minerals if needed and electrolytes, whatever else you might be missing. Then last, an ancestral lifestyle. So your biological lifestyle. So amazing sleep, incredible recovery, sleeping with the sunrise, the sunset, and getting sun on the skin, in the eyes, touching the earth, being in nature, and some contrast therapy as well. So again, when we're looking at this stuff, we want to expose ourselves to CO2. But what does that mean environmentally? We don't want to chronically be exposed to exogenous CO2. We want to create it with our own body, and we want to be able to utilize it. But if you're in an environment with high CO2, which is typically every office, every school, airplanes, travel, buses, whatever, wherever you're traveling, if it's public, you are breathing everybody's breath. And prolonged exposure to that is not healthy. So this training will help your response to being in those situations, but you need to also work on ventilation. So if you're in your home, opening doors, opening windows whenever you can to get as much fresh air and its flow as you can is going to be very important. If you have questions on this, you can DM me. You can ask me any of the questions that you might have. If you want further knowledge, you can go into my course. You can ask about working with me. I create the full program for this, individualized to each and every person. So reach out if you need it. Love you.